At an old gas station on California's Route 66, with the midday sun dancing on the asphalt, 5 Harley-Davidson engines roared like a single orchestra. The most notorious members of the Hells Angels had stopped for gas, their black leather vests marking them as lords of the highway. But just a few meters away, an old man standing beside a weathered 1972 Chevrolet pickup was about to change their lives forever. Because that man was one of Hollywood's quietest legends. And the Hells Angels had no idea they were about to learn the true meaning of the word outlaw. The old man stood by the gas pump. He looked to be in his 80s, but the weight on his shoulders carried the exhaustion of decades. Faded blue jeans, a black t-shirt, and a brown leather jacket. The lines on his face were etched by the California sun and thousands of film sets. The hands now holding the gas pump were the same hands that had gripped horse reins, pulled gun triggers, and turned script pages for years. When the rumble of the Harleys died down, 5 men dismounted. Leading them was a man they called Tank, late 40s, standing well over 6 feet tall. Beside him was Viper, about 35, with scar tissue mapping his face. Behind them came Razor, Snake, and Demon. All carried the same arrogant gaze. For them, the world was divided into 2 groups, Hells Angels and everyone else. And right now, that old man fell into the everyone else category. As Tank approached the gas pump, he glanced sideways at the old man. Something felt familiar, but he couldn't quite place it. Without looking up, the old man hung the nozzle back on the pump and turned toward his pickup. Even his walk carried something distinct. Calm, deliberate, unhurried but unbending. Tank turned to his brothers and said in a low voice, "This guy reminds me of someone, but I can't figure out who." Viper shrugged. What else could he be but some old-timer? Demon, the youngest and loudest of the group, started talking as he approached the pump, his voice carrying across the station. "Look at that, Tank. A real American classic, a '72 Chevy." But his tone dripped with mockery rather than admiration. "Almost as old as us. Wonder if the engine still runs? Or is it just for decoration?" His brothers laughed. Even Tank smirked. The old man still didn't react. He simply grabbed the door handle, about to climb inside. Snake stepped forward, flipping his long hair back. "Hey, old-timer," he called out, his voice laced with challenge. "How many years you been driving that truck? You buy it before I was even born?" Laughter rippled through the group. Razor added, "Maybe you were cruising around with the dinosaurs, right?" The old man stopped. He released the door handle, turned slowly, and looked at them. But there was no expression on his face. He just listened in silence. Tank, asserting his role as leader, moved closer. "Look, old man," he said, his voice now harder, more direct. "We're the real outlaws on these roads now. You understand? Judging by your attitude, you were probably fast back in the day. But it's a new generation now. We're the masters of freedom, rebellion, and the asphalt." A small smile appeared on the old man's face, and for the first time, he spoke. "Outlaw, huh?" His voice was quiet but clear. "Do you really know what that word means?" Tank's brow furrowed. There was something in the old man's voice, an authority, a weight. "Of course we know," he shot back. "Being an outlaw means not following anyone's rules, carving your own path, rejecting what society tries to force on you. We're free on these roads. We answer to no one." His brothers nodded in agreement, some shouting, "Yeah," Demon added. "Old guys like you follow the law, but we're different. We're outside the system." The old man leaned against his pickup, crossing his arms. "It was 1971, he began, his voice a little louder now, but still calm. "A director named Don Siegel brought me a script, a film called Dirty Harry. I was going to play a cop, but the character I played defied the rules with a toughness never seen before in a lawman. Back then, nobody in Hollywood wanted to see a character like that. Too radical, too hard, too outlaw, they said." Tank's eyes narrowed. "Dirty Harry," he repeated. His brain was starting to connect the dots. The old man continued, "Yes, Dirty Harry. Then I made many westerns, A fistful of dollars, the good, the bad, and the ugly, unforgiven. In those films, I played real outlaws. Men who operated outside the justice system, beyond society's rules, guided only by their own moral code. He paused, looking at them. But I didn't just act those characters. I directed them too. $1 Million Baby, Gran Torino. I told stories, I created characters, and in every one of them, I showed what it really means to be an outlaw. Viper took a step back. Now he understood. The old man's face, the tone in his voice, the authority in his stance. It all clicked into place. "Wait," he said, his voice trembling. Are you Clint Eastwood?" Silence fell over the gas station. Only the distant sound of a passing car and the whisper of wind could be heard. Tank, Razor, Snake, Demon, all of them stood frozen. Clint Eastwood tilted his head slightly. "Yes," he said simply. "I'm Clint Eastwood." Tank's mouth hung open. He was standing face to face with one of Hollywood's living legends, perhaps the greatest of them all, and he'd called him Old Timer. Demon, the youngest and loudest of the group, couldn't manage a single word now. Razor took a deep breath. "Damn," he muttered under his breath. Snake shook his head side to side, as if trying to wake from a dream. Clint was still leaning against his pickup, but something had shifted in the air. He was no longer just an old man, he was a piece of cinema history. The star, director, and producer of films that had grossed billions. An Oscar-winning artist. And most importantly, someone millions of people around the world saw as a real outlaw. "I know," Clint said, his voice now a bit harder. "You think you're outlaws. You've got motorcycles, you've got tattoos, you don't answer to anyone. But let me tell you the truth." He paused, looking each of them in the eye. "Being a real outlaw isn't about riding a motorcycle. Being a real outlaw means standing up for your values, even when everyone's against you." Tank swallowed hard. His mouth had gone dry. "Mr. Eastwood," he tried to say, but the words came out wrong. Clint raised one hand, silencing him. "I'm not finished yet," he said. "You told me my time's past. But let me tell you something. I'm 93 years old. I'm still making films, I'm still telling stories, because age doesn't determine what a person can do. Character does. And right now you're showing yours." He pointed his finger at them. "I don't know what you think you are, but real outlaws don't disrespect others. Real outlaws don't insult the elderly. Real outlaws." He paused, his eyes locking with Tank's. And then, right at that moment, something happened. A car approached from the distance, moving fast. An old sedan, covered in dust. It skidded to a stop at the gas station. The doors flew open and a young couple rushed out, panic written across their faces. "Help us!" they shouted. "Please, help us!" In the back seat of the car, a little girl could be seen, crying, and Clint Eastwood knew exactly what he had to do. But the Hells Angels? They were now facing a choice. The man who stepped out was about 25, his t-shirt soaked with sweat. He was breathing hard. "Please, our daughter is sick, really sick. We were taking her to the hospital, but our car broke down. The engine overheated, it's smoking. We need water, coolant, or the engine's going to blow." His voice cracked, tears welling in his eyes. "Please, help her. She's only 8 years old and her fever's dangerously high. The nearest hospital is 50 miles away." The sound of the child crying in the back filled the silence of the gas station. Tank and his brothers stood frozen. This was unexpected. Usually when they ran into trouble on the road, they handled it among themselves. They didn't get involved in other people's problems. But now, standing in front of Clint Eastwood, they had to make a choice. Viper opened his mouth. We're bikers, man. We don't deal with cars," he said, but his voice wavered with uncertainty. Demon added, "We don't have coolant. Our engines are different," but neither of them could bring themselves to look at Clint. Clint didn't hesitate for a second. He walked to the back of his pickup and opened the bed. Inside were a few toolboxes, a spare radiator hose, and most importantly, a large jug of coolant. He pulled it out and walked over to the father. "Pop the hood," he said, his voice carrying both command and compassion. The man nodded gratefully and rushed to open it. Clint leaned in, inspecting the engine. His hands were still skilled. "Radiator leak," he said, diagnosing it immediately. "Simple fix. You'll be on the road in 10 minutes. The Hells Angels stood back, watching in stunned silence. This man, Hollywood's millionaire star, was fixing a stranger's car in a dusty gas station. Tank swallowed hard, feeling something stir inside him. Shame? Admiration? Maybe both. Clint kept talking as he worked, not looking at anyone. "Being a real outlaw," he said, his voice blending with the sounds of the engine, "isn't just about breaking rules. It's about helping those in need. It's about doing the right thing, even when no one's watching." He wiped down a part with an old rag, tightening the hose. "You think you're free because you ride motorcycles. But real freedom is being strong enough to help others." Tank stepped forward. Something was changing inside him. He watched what Clint was doing, then glanced at the toolbox. Can I help?" he asked, his voice almost shy. Clint looked up, his eyes meeting Tank's. There was no judgment in that gaze, only invitation. "Of course," Clint said. "Hold this wrench while I secure the hose." Tank knelt down, his hands trembling slightly. They worked together, silent but in sync. Viper, Razor, Snake, and Demon moved closer, forming a circle around them. The mockery was gone. The arrogance was gone. They just watched in silence. Within 10 minutes, the engine was fixed. Clint filled the coolant, closed the radiator cap. "Turn the ignition," he told the father. The man did, and the engine roared to life with a smooth purr. No more steam rising from the hood. The father broke down, tears streaming down his face as he embraced Clint. Thank you so much," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're like an angel. You saved my daughter." Clint smiled faintly, that famous one-sided grin of his. "No, son," he said. "I just did what needed to be done. Now go, get to that hospital. Your girl's going to be fine." The car pulled away, disappearing into a cloud of dust. The gas station fell quiet again. Clint wiped his hands with the old rag and packed up his tools. The Hells Angels members still stood there, saying nothing. Tank, the oldest and most seasoned of the group, was the first to speak. "Mr. Eastwood," he said, his voice serious and respectful. We made a mistake. We disrespected you. We're sorry." He bowed his head, a gesture the Hells Angels rarely made. But now, standing before this man, there was no other way to respond. Clint placed the toolbox back in his pickup and closed the bed. He turned and looked at them. "Apology accepted," he said simply. Viper stepped forward, a different light now shining in his eyes. "Mr. Eastwood," he said, his voice shaking. "You were always the hero in your films. But I understand now. They weren't just movies. You lived those characters. The man with no name, Dirty Harry, Walt Kowalski." He paused, swallowing hard. "We were trying to be like you, but we imitated the wrong things. The appearance, the toughness, the rebellion. But what really mattered was the character inside, the values, the humanity." Clint nodded slightly. "There was a scene in Gran Torino," he said, his voice softer now, not lecturing, but storytelling. "My character, Walt Kowalski, was an old man, and his neighbor was a young Asian kid. At first, Walt didn't like him. He was prejudiced, but over time, he became a father figure to that boy, and at the end of the film, he sacrifices his own life to protect him." He paused, his eyes gazing into the distance as if reliving that scene. In that moment, Walt becomes a real outlaw. Because he fights the system, takes justice into his own hands. But he doesn't do it for himself. He does it for someone else. Tank felt his eyes welling up. That tough, towering man, the leader of the Hells Angels, was now moved by an old man's words. We just wanted to be free," he said, his voice breaking. "Society always looked at us like we were outcasts, so we became hard, arrogant, to protect ourselves. But you're right. We were on the wrong path." Clint opened the door of his pickup. He was about to climb in, but he turned back one more time. "Listen, boys," he said. And for the first time he used the word boys, not with mockery, but with affection. Age is just a number. I'm 93 years old, and I'm still making films. You're young and strong. You can do so much more. But use your strength in the right place. Use those motorcycles, that energy, for good. Help someone in need. Give coolant to someone broken down on the road. Bring a lost child back to their family. That's how you become a real outlaw. Tank extended his hand. Clint shook it, firm but respectful. We promise, Tank said, his eyes locked on Clint's. From now on, we'll try to be like you. Not just on the outside, but from the heart. Not just with words, but with action. The other members lined up and shook Clint's hand, one by one. Then he did something no one expected. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an old photograph, black and white, from the 1960s. A young Clint on the set of Sergio Leone's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, wearing a poncho, a cigar in his mouth. That legendary stare. He handed the photo to Tank. Keep this, he said. And remember, being a real outlaw isn't an image. It's a way of life. Every day, with every choice, you show who you are. Tank took the photograph, his hands trembling. This is priceless, he said. I'm not sure we deserve it. Clint smiled. Not yet. But you will. I believe in you. Clint climbed into his pickup, fired up the engine, and disappeared into the horizon of Route 66. A few weeks later, a small article appeared in the local newspaper. Hell's Angels find missing children, return them to families. Another headline read, Motorcycle group helps elderly couple stranded on roadside. And yet another, Hell's Angels members donate to local orphanage. The stories were small, not front-page news. But in each one, there were photos of Tank and his brothers. And one day, a package arrived at Clint Eastwood's production office. Inside was a Hell's Angels vest patch, along with a letter, written in Tank's handwriting. Mr. Eastwood, we haven't forgotten what you taught us. Every day we try to be like you. We're sending you this patch because thanks to you we became real outlaws. Thank you for everything. Clint read the letter and smiled. He took the patch and hung it on the wall of his office. Right beside it was an old poster from Gran Torino. Two symbols side by side. One from Hollywood, one from the streets. But both represented the same thing. Being a real outlaw means inspiring others. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that real strength comes from character, not appearance, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to remember what it means to be truly free. And tell us in the comments, what does being a real outlaw mean to you?